Okay, yeah, just address the chairs however you want to sit. There's a big hole in the middle with Okay. How long does this go for? Okay, so I'm going to start now. What I'm going to do here, so this whole thing is stuff you haven't heard of. So what I will do is if the crowd has heard of it, I will not talk about it. I'll move on to the next one. So we'll see, so we'll kind of adjust itself based on what people already know. If I run out of ideas, because I have a couple backups, and I will just ask for random topics, and I will try to find something you haven't heard of. Okay, so that's the general idea. As we go through things as well, does everyone see this? Is this right now? I don't see the blue. Don't worry about that. Those are just links. So
if you go along there, I won't be able to say.
Yeah, if anything that's in blue will be a URL. When I send out the slides, we just need you to follow up to each topic, but it doesn't matter for the content. Along the way, if we go to a particular concept that you want to try out, then we can do something there as well. But otherwise, I'll just describe it. Okay. First, so this is somewhat random order, but that's how it goes. So, how many people in the crowd have heard about business model canvas? Wow, that's already something. Okay, so I'm going to, this was not actually what I want to talk about, but given that not enough people know about it, I'm going to do this first as a kind of an introduction thing, and then I'll add the other content. It's not kind of point thing. Okay, so business model canvas is a way to represent a business model using a single piece of paper. It is quite popular now in the startup space, simply because, actually I don't know why, probably because it's one page thing and a lot of startups need to do business models, it's got trendy and everyone does it. Steve Blank liked it, which then he started pitching that and everyone knows Steve Blank, so there you go. Everyone does it. The key thing here is it tries to break down a business model into 9 fundamental building blocks. So you have your value proposition, customer relationships, channels, customer segments you're selling to, so this is how you relate to your customers, how you're going to make money, revenue streams, and then you have the other side, who you're partnering with, what activities you need to do, what resources you need, and your cost structure. So this is one way to try to represent the lot in one page, and then you can look at it, iterate over it, etc. So it's a kind of a nice little tool. I would have thought more people would know about this, because this is not actually edgy anymore. It's a bit late majority kind of. Okay. How many people have heard of a customer value canvas? I'm guessing no one. Excellent, got one. Okay. So this is something, this is like, let's say the next level of this. So when people are using the business model canvas, there's difficulty in trying to actually work out things like value proposition and customer segments. It's actually kind of hard to work out who are we selling to and what are we providing them. The guy who invented business model canvas, Alex Osterwalder, said, okay, let's try to go another level of detail. So also he was looking up stuff. Is everyone familiar with Clayton Christensen, disruptive innovation, stuff like that? The Innovator's Dilemma? Oh wow, I should put that one in here too. Okay, so he has a concept called jobs to be done. So if you look at products, like what he suggests, the way to think about it is to say, what job is this product doing for someone? Right, so he has this nice story about milkshakes, and people say, oh, people drink milkshakes, they think they drink it because they like it because it's sweet or something. And it turns out when they studied it, it turned out the milkshake wasn't about the sweetness or the drinking, it was more to deal with the boredom of having to drive to work. So you go, oh, how can I make a milkshake perform that job better? So I'll make it more interesting, I'll put chunks of stuff inside it. So then they're entertained while they're drinking this milkshake, because it wasn't about the taste, it was about the amusement. So this is trying to understand what the job is to be done. So if I look at customer segments, I look at what jobs are out there. Can I design something that does that job? What do I improve on the existing options they have for doing that job? How does it work, etc. And then I can look at value proposition. So here are what do I do to provide this, and then what do people get? What do I do to get gains or relieve pain? Okay, does that make sense? Yes?
Is this on a per feature basis or per product? Or
per product service.
Okay.
Yeah, so you'd have one per, if actually to be more accurate, it'd be per job, if you will. Yeah, so if I go back to the original one, if you do a business model canvas, I would do it per customer segment, per kind of a value proposition, not logging. Okay, is that something new? Okay, it sounds something useful, might want to look into. It's good. So if you when I send this out, you can follow the link and do more. Okay.
Would you use them together, the business model canvas?
Yes, this is actually, if you look at the business model canvas, value proposition customer segment, that's just a zoom in. This is actually version 0.8 though, so it's all experimental. But it's okay. Okay, cool. How many people have heard of story maps? Excellent, right? So I expected this, which is why this is not what I'm going to talk about. How many people heard of grading story maps? One, yeah, that's because I work with you. Okay, so one thing, when you look at a product and we say, like, so a story map, I have activities, I have features that support those activities, goals, etc., and I break it down. So that allows me to see how what we're building supports an overall process and overall context. But if we look at, if we think about products even, not every feature is of the same level of importance, right? So are people familiar with the Kano attributes? So delighters, hygiene, performance type stuff like that, right? So if we acknowledge that, then it means that when we list out our features, we actually want to, we could grade them, right? So let's say, let's see, it's kind of different. So I could have A, if you will, for the top level version of this feature, and I could have like F if it was completely inadequate, and then I might have different grades in between. And then I might say, for each type of feature, I'm going to have almost like a minimum grade that I want for it. Because some of the features, I don't care if they are A grade, because they're sort of hygiene. I actually just say, just get that to C, and that's it. This one, on the other hand, I might say that one has to be an A, because that's actually our primary aspect. That's part of our core value proposition. So I want you to make that as good as you can possibly imagine. And these other ones might be in between. So the idea here is to look at each of the features and actually give them target grades, which then start to help you communicate essentially your product strategy. Okay, does that make sense? Something useful. Did you just learn what?
What do you grade again? Like the Kano dimensions?
Something like that. No, let's imagine this was, let me think. Could be something like menu navigation or something. So I could say menu navigation, I'm just going to make it match my competitors. I'm not going to do anything better than them. And I'll consider that, let's say, B grade. Let's say one of our designers said, we got this really super cool menu navigation thing, which is better than anyone else has ever done. We'll call that A, and then I could say, I don't care if we do that, so I'll say our minimum is B. If we somehow magically have more money and time, then sure, go for it, but I actually don't care.
So the grade is how much of your likes?
It's sort of your target for that feature. So you'd say, we only want to go so far with each thing. But then it also helps you have that discussion, right? Because if you say, I think we only need to go to C grade there, someone else might say, well, we're just going to go to minimum for that. That's actually, we want to make that a primary part of our product.
Is that like building the bike or the car or the...
Yeah, but now going to aspects, like, so I'm building a bike, so what are the brakes like? What is the handling like? What's the cost like, etc. And we give targets for each of those. Okay, useful? Yeah. Excellent, okay. So far I'm pretty good. Okay, how many people have heard of MVP, minimal viable product? Excellent, good, okay. Which is why I'm not going to talk about this. How many people heard of concierge MVP? Ooh, okay. There's not too many, but a little bit more. So, concierge MVP. So the whole concept of MVP, I'll just go back to this, is you want to get the maximum amount of validated learning with the least effort. Okay, so when most people, though, when they're thinking MVP, they think they need to build something, right? That's just the gut reaction, need to build something. Concierge MVP is, actually, how many people have done this trick before where you do the, I'm going to build a system and like it looks like a real thing, but behind the scenes it actually sends an email to someone and they have to do all the work. Right?
A button.
How many people have done that? I've just seen this, even in corporates, they do this all the time. That's essentially concierge MVP, right? So we've just put a fancy name to this. So startups are doing this now. The most famous version of the first time this term was used, there's a startup called Food on the Table, which they are they're doing, it's kind of like ordering out, but they do recipes and things like that, and it's much higher end, so they want people to eat more healthy as well. Their dream was like 35,000 stores and selling 1.5 million items. They said, we'll start where we'll have one store we'll work with and we'll sell 5 things. And then these guys are somewhat not technical, so they said, we're just going to have this front end and everything is actually just people running around. Zappos had a very similar type setup when they were like selling shoes. Everyone heard of Zappos? People buy shoes online. When they started out, all they did was take pictures of shoes in other stores, and when people ordered them, they'd go to the store, buy it, and then so, like that's the kind of thing. That's the general idea. So, this is kind of something interesting even to talk with when you're dealing with even more mature companies, because this is really cheap way to test stuff out. Like, 'cause you don't have to build anything. If it doesn't work, who cares, right? You just go, okay, that didn't work. We'll just stop it. Okay, useful concepts. Yeah. Okay. How many people have heard of magic tests? Magic tests. Okay, 1. Okay, this is a similar type idea. This is more of a web type view of it. So Eric Ries, when he talks about this, he talks about he had a company called InView, which was doing kind of like messaging avatar type stuff. And one of the things he says is the idea is that I'll set up a website and it has nothing on it except it describes a problem that we think other people have. And then we just hint that we're going to solve this problem, but we don't actually say how we're going to do it. We just say, we have a magic solution to your problem, we can solve it. If you want this or you're interested, just sign up. And the idea is that if you're essentially trying to sell magic, right? So you say, if I can solve your problem as if by magic, would you sign up? And then you see if anyone signs up. Now, what happens a lot, which is what happened to them with InView, is no one signs up, right? So you get no response whatsoever. And his whole thing is, if you can't even sell magic, how can you sell your product, which is definitely not magical? So again, this is a cheap way to test stuff. A lot of startups, there's a startup called LaunchRock now, which was designed specifically to build magic tests. So you put up a site, you say your thing, you see how many people sign up.
What's the name? LaunchRock?
LaunchRock.
Doesn't sound very magical.
Rock.
Oh, wait, what's interesting, LaunchRock started out by saying, are you interested in a way to quickly launch or test your concept with a magic test? Sign up here if you're interested. And they did it. So they kind of dog-fooded their own thing, and they got a lot of people. So again, they magic test a magic test platform. So it's weird meta. Okay. Okay, interesting? Yes? Okay, cool. Good one. Kanban boards, Kanban. How many people heard of Kanban? Okay, excellent. Which is why I'm not going to talk about it. Okay, how many people heard of a detective's blackboard? Yeah, this is very rare. I keep trying to look for this again online when I want to reference it, and almost no one writes about it, which is odd, so usually this one's pretty good for people who haven't heard it. The general idea is, so with a Kanban board, you usually expect to have multiple work items moving through, so you have all these little cards, and they're going through different stages. There's 2 guys, one named Arlo Belshi, another guy named James Shore. They talk about something they do where they say, we want our teams to focus on single things rather than doing multiple things at a time. So they'll pick one item and they'll say everyone works on that one item. So instead of having a card which just might have a title on it, we will put everything that represents that work item on a detective's blackboard. Just like, in the crime shows, when they stick all the photos and stuff. That's the general concept. So they put this is an example from another team that set up a detective's blackboard, but anything that you say, okay, we want to understand this particular piece of work, what do we want to know? Oh, we might put up a data model up there. We might put up screen flows, we put up pictures, we might put other context maps, and we'll just put it all up there. So then when we look at the board, it's everything related to the thing we're working on so we can try to understand it. They call it the team's external brain. So they've shifted their Kanban board to be focused on a single thing, which they work on, and then when it's finished, when it moves to the next step, they just collapse it all together, put it in a folder, and then move on. Okay, does that make sense? Now, what I've also seen is, which is another level past this, is I've seen people say, but I have more than one team, so I work on more than one thing, so they actually have multiple detectives blackboards, so they can get these big things. It looks very different than what your typical Agile board will look like because there's a lot more information on it. It's not just a single card. Okay? Interesting? Yes? Okay. How am I for time? Ooh, lots of time. Okay, so retrospectives. Everyone's heard of retrospectives, I assume? Yes? Retrospectives? Yeah? Okay, cool. So I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about retrospective dialogue sheets. How many people have heard of these? Ooh, wow, really? One. Okay, cool. So this is apparently, I think it was from a university in Sweden or something came up with this concept of dialogue sheets, which is pretty much why we haven't heard of it. But there's a consultant in the UK, I think he's still a consultant, Alan Kelly. He thought, this is a great concept. I'm going to apply this to retrospectives as well. So he created these things called retrospective dialogue sheets. The URL, you can download them, they're free. The idea is that instead of us having a retrospective where, we talk and we put up post-its and stuff like this, we'll actually have this large sheet of paper with instructions that we'll all sit together and kind of go through. And what they noticed is the whole reason with this technology is they noticed that the interaction behavior is very different. And it seems to bring out different types of behavior that are desirable. So if you can't really read it, but it actually goes through all the kind of things that you would normally associate with a retrospective, but you tend to not have the kind of dominating behavior that you would have in let's say, a more traditional retrospective. So again, this is very experimental, and it's worth trying out. I would recommend that you do try it out and then even provide feedback, and then we'll see if this actually works out. But that's why this is edgy. Okay, useful, interesting. Anyone want to try this out? I'd be curious as well. Yeah. Might do another session. We'll just print one of these out and do it. Okay. I'm sure you haven't heard of this because I came up with it. So there's no way you would have heard of it. Okay. Nobody? Didn't read my blog? Okay. Okay, so how many people are familiar with solution-focused therapy? Oh, one. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So what I did, there's two concepts I try to combine. There's something I experimented on my own, which was called goal-driven retrospective. So the general idea is if you've done retrospectives, you notice when people talk about what's currently happening, they get, actually I picked this up when I was doing current state value stream mapping. So when people talk about the problems, they get very depressed. I started noticing everyone's starting to frown. I go, wow, everyone's getting depressed. Until you get to the solutions and they start getting really happy again. Actually, some people, they almost don't survive the current state stuff because they say, oh, this sucks, I don't want to talk about it anymore. So I went to goal-driven, so let's focus on where we want to go, and then we'll come back from there, and the people are happier because they're talking about where they want to be. Now, solution focus is a similar type concept. Don't think about the problem, focus on the solution, and then how do you get to the solution rather than the other way around. So I combined them both. So there's more details there, but the rough idea is you'll go through 4 steps. The first one being, you start out and say, let's not worry about how we've done it, let's imagine a miracle occurred, we've solved all our problems. What do we want it to look like? Right? Because the first thing is, let's come to an agreement about where we want to go. Okay? Then it's specifically, how could you tell? So what are the visible things you could see that are in place now that we've solved all our problems? The interesting thing that happens here is then if there are differences in what the miracle looks like for other people, then you can kind of resolve that and say, oh, this is my future and this is your future, and we can work out the differences out. And you get people to group the themes, if you will. So now we have these themes of our miracle future. Then this is the scaling question. If 10 is that ideal, and 0 is where nothing is working, so it's actually completely horrible, where are we now? Because for the most part, we're never at 0, right? So our current state is never as bad as it looks. It's not 0, it's usually like 4 or 5 or something. Right? This is to try to, again, prevent us from being depressed that we're nowhere near the ideal, because we're actually along our way somewhere. And then we can ask, what are we doing already that works? So this is kind of like, people done like future perspectives, future backwards, which is a cognitive edge thing, and here's another one which I forgot offhand. Appreciative inquiry as well. another form of that. So this idea here is you can say, we're already probably doing something that's working, or we couldn't possibly be doing everything wrong. Right? Like we're not that perfect at being wrong. So it could be, but then that would be an achievement in itself. So then we can use, because this is trying to identify resources. So what are our current strengths? We've already done stuff that are better than stuff, so we can exploit that and try to be closer. And then we say, using the resources we have, what can we do to take one step closer? So that's where we get into the ideas, etc. Okay, so this is a different way to frame the retrospective, such that it's goal-focused and also more future-oriented.
Is that per topic? So as in the top thing you say, what are the things that would be different?
Yeah, per theme.
2, 3, and 4 are they per topic?
Yes.
Per section.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, useful, interesting? Anyone want to try this? I need more people to try because I'm, again, experimental. Okay, cool. Idealized design, how many people have heard of this? So anyone heard of Russell Ackoff, the systems thinking guy? No, okay. So Russell Ackoff was one of the big, I don't know if he died somewhat recently. He was one of the big thinkers in the systems thinking space. He did some work with Bell Labs. There's a very interesting video that you can watch here. I'll give you the links there. The general idea, so when he went to Bell Labs in about the 1950s, Bell Labs was the leading R&D lab in the world. It's kind of weird to think about because they don't even have stuff like that anymore. But they had an interesting problem. So they had a session where I think the VP of the labs or the president of the labs brought in all the people and said, in general, just to shorten the story, everything that they were known for was invented last century, right? So all the stuff that there was in the 1950s, everything that they were known for was invented in the 19th century. So they said, we're supposed to be the most advanced industrial R&D lab in the world, and nothing we've done in the last 50 years has mattered. So what the hell are we doing? So then they said, okay, all we're doing is optimizing the little pieces. We need to optimize the system. So we need to think differently about how we do R&D. So the rules were, in their case, the entire telephone system in the US was destroyed last night. You're starting from scratch. What should it look like? And so this idea is that whatever you're looking at, assume it's all gone. You're starting from scratch. You now have to redesign it, but you can't use any science fiction. Right? So all the technology has to be available now. You can't say, I want to magic this, I want to magic that, because that's kind of pointless. So this is really about talking about, from an idealized design perspective, how things should be now. If we could start from scratch and we did it all over and we only use existing stuff, how should it be? Not how it could be, but just how should it be? And what so the interesting thing from what they did at Bell Labs, they actually invented every change to the telephone system from, I think, except for taking phones, from then until now, except for taking phones off or taking pictures off your phone and internet, because they didn't know anything about that. But everything else, touchtone, caller ID, mobile phones, speed dialing, everything came from this one project in the 1950s. So that's the general idea. And that's just saying, how should it be with stuff we actually think is quite feasible versus sci-fi? Right? The sci-fi stuff would have been camera phones. It's strange to think about, but camera phones is sci-fi. And internet, which no one anticipated. Okay, useful? This is, again, another way to do, I would say this is not necessarily your week-to-week iterative or retrospective, but more like a bigger type of thing. It's good for product design too as well. Okay. Continuous integration, how many people have heard of that? Hopefully everybody. Yes, okay. So I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about continuous testing. How many people have heard of this? A little bit more, but not enough. So continuous testing is when every time you save, so if I am modifying something I save, it will automatically trigger the test to run. Okay, so this is actually a relatively old concept, 2007, so that's 5 years plus, because that was this link here was a summary article. Research was done earlier than that. There are several tools available for a few technologies that actually implement this. Autotest, there's also one called, one I hadn't heard of before. There's one that runs on Eclipse called continuous testing. There's a few, Infinitest, that's the other one. And I think there's one for Mighty Moose or something. Is a .NET one?
Yes,
Mighty Moose, yes. Let's go. Yeah, so yeah, there's the people who know it, you know the stuff. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. The first time I heard about this was with Autotest, and I thought that was pretty cool. But it didn't catch on as much. This is still a very cool concept, though. Okay, useful, interesting. Yeah. Okay. How many people heard of Guantanamo? Yeah, right. This is really rare because this was a bit edgy. So the whole thing with this one is if you have any, like, so you run Guantanamo, if the code was not executed during the test, it would actually delete it. And you can tell when this was created was during the whole Guantanamo thing, because they were making a political statement as well as a coding tool. They did something else called Ashcroft, which was about, you know, what was his role? I think he was like secretary. Yeah. So same thing. They were making political statements while they're giving these crazy tools at the same time. But this was sort of only half joking. Because it was funny, they ran Guantanamo on itself, it deleted a whole chunk of code, but it kept running, so they said, oh, we didn't need that. Interesting, this is a bit wacky actually, but it's an interesting way to even think about things. Like, could you actually go so far as to say, I'm just going to kill anything I'm not testing? Will it work? Okay, I just actually, when we were in the speaking room and someone was talking about something, I just remembered this one again. It's called Grapple. Has anyone heard of this one? This is like a Brian Merrick thing, a long time ago. So the idea is that he actually, so this is it's a diagram using OmniGraffle. So it's like a Visio equivalent on the Mac. So when he'll do a screen flow in OmniGraffle, the neat thing is that this is executable. So he could make a diagram in OmniGraffle. So look, if you could imagine making a diagram in Visio, it would be linked to a web application, and then you could run it. So he was trying to create essentially a visual execution tool. So then you could also see, you could actually see the test case before the screen even, right? Because you do this first and say, that's what this screen flow is going to look like. And then do all these things, and then I'll link up my actual web application to it, and I'll just run. It's a neat concept. I think he stopped working on it because this is actually quite hard to do. But it's an interesting concept. Okay. Useful, interesting? Mainly interesting. It's not really that useful. Okay, I'm going to go to different theme here. Chaos Monkey. How many people have heard of that? Yeah, a few, which means all technical ops types guys. So this is what Netflix does. They run on Amazon Web Services. They have a job called Chaos Monkey, which randomly kills instances and services within the architecture. Right? So you can imagine servers will disappear randomly.
In production?
Yes. Right? The purpose is to make sure that they can survive that, because even without Chaos Monkey, this is happening anyway. Right? That's the deal with complex systems. You will get failures constantly. They're doing this to make sure that they can survive it. So everything is designed, like, so they're not going to say, oh, we got lucky, nothing went down. They will deliberately make sure it goes down, so you better be prepared for it. Another level of this is what people now call game day. So this is like it's almost like a field exercise, like a war game type thing, where you do this at large scale. So large scale fault injection across critical systems in production. And you have everyone there, and you say, can you survive this? Again, we're doing this deliberately to make sure that we can survive it when it is unintended. Okay, so it's a live fire exercise. Interesting thing about this is, so I think who does this? Etsy does this. Netflix does this as well. There's all the major people do it. When they look at it, they're looking at everything. So is we have the right people, can they handle it? Do we have the right culture? Do we have the right process, application, service, infrastructure, software, hardware? So you're testing everything. Is our overall system capable of being resilient in the midst of constant failure, which is really their situation. Interesting. Yeah, how many people think their workplace would be willing to do something like this? Like, it is really more, this is like another level of skill, because they're training like firefighters at this point. Well, yeah, it's ironic when people say firefighting and they go, you're not acting like a firefighter, because firefighters do a lot of training to make sure they don't get killed. Lean startup, how many people have heard of that? Okay, good. I'm not going to talk about it. So, how many people have heard of lean startup for change? You probably, oh, one? Okay.
I don't know if I've heard of it with that name. Done all
So this was something that I only really encountered probably this year, a little bit earlier. It was still very vague at that point. We had a session in the conference I went to where all the guys said, hey, it's kind of neat, and we talked a little bit more about it. And Yuval Yaret summarized what we talked about. The general idea is, so if we think lean startup, this being this kind of, we have an idea, we build something, or we do something that kind of tests that idea, and then we check to see whether it actually was valid. So our concept of a product or a service in this case, did it actually meet what actually happened when we deployed it? The same idea is here. So we have an idea of what is a useful change to introduce to an environment in order to cause an improvement. But it's just a hypothesis. We're just running an experiment. So we can do the same thing. We'll deploy that change out there, and then we'll check to see if it actually works, and then we'll adjust. So first thing is you identify the organizational problem. You propose a hypothesis for a change. So this is two things, and I'll talk about when we get down there. We'll identify an assumption to that hypothesis. So let's say I believe that if I'm able to teach, maybe let's say this group of people automated testing, then I will get an improvement in, I don't know, defect rate or something, right? I believe that will happen. So I will do that. Let's say I'll train a few people. Then I design a minimal viable change to test that. So let's say, in order for me to test that this is true, I will pick a single group and I will just train those people who work in that group, and then I'll see if the defect rate for that group improves. And I believe this to be true because automated testing is great. So I'll do that. Now, I'll run that, and then I'll say, hey, wait a minute, nothing happened. Right, defect rate didn't move at all. I go, okay, what happened? Then I can try to understand what I made incorrect in my assumptions, and I do an adjustment. Or it could happen, and I'll go, okay, I still believe it, so I'll do another test. So I'll do something else. Now I believe that this will be replicatable across multiple groups, so on and so forth. So the interesting thing as well is with lean startups, people talk about value hypothesis versus the growth hypothesis. So value hypothesis being, will anyone buy the product? And growth hypothesis is, will enough people buy the product that I can actually run a sustainable business? So we can say the same thing with the change. I can say I can change someone and cause an improvement. That's the value hypothesis. Can I convince enough people, will enough people do it that it'll actually have an overall impact on the organization? That's my growth hypothesis. Okay, because I could always say I can convince one group to do it, and then I can say, can I convince 10, 100, 1,000? Maybe not. So there's that. So this is a way to think about change, just as you would a lean startup on a product. Interesting? Useful? Okay. And how much time do I have left? Any time? Am I over time? Okay. Okay, then I'm done. That's it? Is that it? Is it a break? Oh, is there a break? Well, we can keep talking if you like. Got more stuff. But that's it. Okay. I'll send out the slides and you can follow the links. Or if you would have any more questions, feel free to come and ask.
What's the next slide?
Oh, the next slides are mindset stuff. Well, I can talk through the break if people like. So these are more when people talk about agile mindsets. So have you heard of various concepts? Like, has everyone heard of early pain? Mm-hmm. Early pain? Well known, okay, so I won't talk about that. Have you heard of no problem is a problem?
Yes. I've just seen that picture.
Yeah, that's my picture. I drew that. Have you heard of authority versus responsibility focus? So useful thing here. Usually I do this just to say there's a different mindset here. So authority focus is when you just say, what is my job? And therefore it's not my job, it's not my problem. Right? So whole is on your side of both kind of thing. Yeah? Responsibility focus is where you don't care what the job is. All you say is we have a particular outcome we want to achieve. What do we need to do to get there? Therefore, how can I help? So what we're trying to move is from here to here. And that's a nice, simple way to just summarize what the shift looks like. Related to that is leadership styles, which comes from Kurt Lewin. Authoritarian type stuff. So if you say, you go to people and say, just do this, and that includes if you're an agile person, you say, just do this agile thing, you're now in this mode. There's another thing which people think is the appropriate one instead, is where you say, good luck. Because you can self-organize, good luck with that, and you walk. This is the worst. This is worse than that. The better one is actually something very distinct from those two, where you say, okay, this is what we want to do. I'm going to help you do it, and I'm going to be challenging, because I'm going, oh, you want to do that? How did you make that decision? How do you consider these various things? So I want you to think through this stuff. That's called participative democratic. That's usually the most effective.
That's a leadership style, but if you're actually brought in to help the team, that authoritarian is more of a teaching mode, and then the participative is more of a coaching mode.
But even with the teaching mode, if you just say, do this, they don't actually understand what you're you'll get them to do the behavior, but they actually haven't learned anything. So it's like when you teach a test, they memorize the answer, but they don't actually know anything.
The last one leads them to a conclusion by their own questioning rather than your logic you're imposing.
But you'll also be trying to trigger certain...
Yeah, but you're asking the right questions to make them follow your logic, but it's still there.
The key point here is this is not helpful.
Excuse me, Jason. Sorry.